Good evening, everyone. We welcome you to the third workshop of Entrepreneurship Week. At EIC, we believe that knowledge of different domains holds an important place in any entrepreneur's tools work. Knowing how to apply domain knowledge to your venture may determine the success of your business. So, we bring to you a mega collaboration with all domain clubs at IIM Rohtak to arm all budding entrepreneurs with a key to a perfect start. In today's workshop, we have IIM Rohtak's Humanar Club with us. I'll invite Yoshmita to take the stage.
Hello everyone. Human resources is a vital part of every organization, especially at the start of any organization when there is more chaos than stability in the minds of people regarding the future of the business and how they can contribute to it. HR understands their issue, guides them, and brings the best out of them. Thus, HR plays a very vital role in the life cycle of a startup. We welcome you all to the Entrepreneurship Week. Our today's guest is Mr. Sandeep Bhatt, founder of Mindspeak. He would be enlightening us on the topic, managing the right team in a startup, both at the beginning and while scaling up. He is an avid problem solver and technopreneur who is passionate about technology and people development. With 25 years of entrepreneurial management, consulting, and product development, he has experience across diverse domains. Battle hardened through 2 decades of building and managing high productive technology teams focused on producing innovative technology and intellectual property. Currently, he is working on creating futuristic technology platforms and consulting organizations in building an awesome workplace culture leadership pipeline. In parallel, he is playing leadership role, giving business coaching and leveraging his experience. He has expertise to consult and mentor startups and SMEs for growth. We welcome you, sir. We would love to know about your experiences. Would you please share your journey and your thoughts on the topic with us?
Sure. Thank you so much. And first of all, good evening, everybody. So we'll do this session in 3 stages. I'll just talk about my journey in brief. A little bit takeaways, what I've learned overall these 25 plus years, and then we'll have a Q&A. I hope that works for everybody. Okay. So I passed out in 1994. I'm a computer science graduate. And then, like everybody else, in 90s, the computer industry was not as established as early 90s I'm talking about, as it was towards later part of that decade and subsequently early part of this century. So I worked initially in a manufacturing plant for a year. I worked in a service industry for around 1.5 years before I discovered that my interest was in core product development. I wanted to build software products from scratch, and that's how I joined an organization called CDAC, which is primarily one of the India's premier research and development organizations. So worked there for a few years, and that's where the startup bug bit me. So I wanted to do more than I was able to do at that point in time. So a few of us got together, brainstormed, and decided to do our own startup and build some technology around that. And this is around 99-2000 time frame when the concept of startups in India was not there. Mostly people were interested in doing outsourced projects for US and European markets, and forget about technology space. People did not even understand what product development is at that point in time. So that's when we actually developed some patented technology for mobiles especially, and we were reasonably decently successful, but not the way we had visualized. And so while it was not a failure, it was not the kind of astounding success we were expecting it to be. Then I went back to corporate, and at the same time I decided to learn why the business did not work the way we had anticipated. And that's when I did my MBA from Symbiosis around 2007, 8, 9 time frame. And I had some learnings from there. I continued in corporate for another few years till 2015 when I decided to move on and started Mindspeak, where we do consulting primarily around building organization culture, because the learning over the years has been that culture is something which the differentiator of culture is something which cannot be replicated. You'll not find any two organizations having same kind of culture. You'll find same kind of people, you'll find same kind of processes. Processes can be replicated, products can be similar, services can be similar, but the people who deliver it, essentially that's what comprises the culture of an organization. That will always be unique. The DNA will be unique, and that's what we have been doing. Apart from doing technical consulting also, especially in the areas of artificial intelligence, machine learning. And that in a nutshell is what the journey over the years has been. And rolling back towards the learning specifically. So one of the learnings, especially focusing on the startup part, was that when we started up, we did not have a plan. We just had a desire to do something. So we did not start off with a plan. We were a bunch of good folks who had worked with each other for some time, but then we decided we were comfortable and we decided to jump in. So the first learning was that you should not start anything unless you have thought out some basic plan. Second is we did not at that point of time think about what skills each person brings to the table. And we're just a group of friends who enjoyed working with each other, and we started without understanding what business actually would need, what running a successful business would require, what kind of skills it would require. So that was another learning. And the third learning was, of course, being able to run the organization once you've got the initial product. How do you scale up the organization? How do you make the business successful? Now, the core of it all, if I reflect back, was, if you take example of, let's say, you want to build a product or service. Let's say we want to build a car. If I want to build a car, probably the actual engine of the car would be what the actual product and service would be, because that would run it. The petrol or diesel or whatever fuel you're using, you can consider your finances as the fuel, because you need them to be in constant churn to propel you forward. Same way, the outer look and feel is something probably, maybe marketing and sales would be analogous to that. But to drive it all, you need tires, and tires are people. Without tires, you cannot move the car. It will be, you might create the most beautiful car in the world, but if the tires are not there, and not just the tires don't have the right pressure, the right size, you'll find running the car very difficult. And why I'm specifically taking example of tires is because more than anything else, you will realize that you tend to change tires more frequently than anything else. Means that people will come and people will go. So that is essentially, how an organization would actually evolve over a period of time. You would probably not change engine frequently. You'll be tuning everything. The oil and all their processes, the transmission, moving energy from one state to another state. They are the processes that help you to do that. But essentially, having the right kind of tire, the right size of tire, the right pressure in the tire is essential to move that product or service forward. And that's what people are to an organization. So what I learned over the years was that while most of the organizations, small and large, talked about people being their most important asset, they were not doing justice to that. So that was my starting point more than a decade back, when I realized that, okay, we need to think differently. Because traditionally, if we talk about the HR or any organization, traditionally HR has actually, if you guys are student of HR, you would know that HR has essentially evolved from IR, industrial relationship. So which was more about managing the unions, their aspirations. It was more a management function. But the structure of organizations itself has evolved over years. We're not exactly in that. While there are factories, but essentially the kind of workforce that drives at factories has also evolved. And the kind of organizations we have now, that has also significantly evolved. So HR is not IR anymore. It's focusing more on the people. And essentially, while organizations still talk about people being their most important assets, there is still a significant gap between what organizations talk about and what actually happens at the ground level. And coming, setting that context, let's come back to the startup stage. Now, startups for any person, let's say it could be you, it could be me, it could be any person among you who gets an idea. Okay, I have got this idea about a service. I got this idea about a product. I got this idea about an NGO. It can be anything, and I want to execute on it. I want to build it. Now, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Any answers? Any guesses? What would be the first thing you'll do? You can unmute and respond.
Creating a structure about the idea.
Creating a structure about the idea. Excellent. Any other guesses?
So creating a roadmap and testing the product.
Creating a roadmap, testing product. Okay.
Like having an MVP, minimum viable product.
Okay. Identifying MVP. What would be the next step after that? So you got a plan, you got a broad idea about what you want to do, and you have worked out the details of MVP. What would you do next?
To find out the right people for the idea.
Okay. To find out the right people for the idea to sell to?
No, to work with the founding team.
Okay. So do you think you would have to sell your idea to those people?
Yes, so even while hiring the people, we need to find the people who are with a similar mindset and who can understand the crux of the product and can then sell the same replica what we are trying to sell them. So, the similar mindset.
Yeah, excellent. So we have come to second stage itself, where we hit the need for people. In startups, one thing is very clear, that if you have a co-founder, the possibility of you getting funding is very high as compared to being a lone ranger. Okay, so we essentially need a co-founder. So what kind of co-founder do we need? I just heard Isha mention that somebody who is of similar mindset. So I would say yes and no. You want somebody who is equally passionate about what you want to do, but not necessarily think same as you. That is very crucial point out there. Why? Because first of all, as a co-founder, you will want somebody who has got complementary skills. For example, if you're good at finances, maybe you want somebody good at marketing, you want somebody good at strategy, product development. That's the first thing that you'll look at, is the skills. The second thing that you essentially need to look at are behavioral skills. Because what essentially the first team you build of co-founders will define what culture you will have in the organization 5, 10, 15 years down the line. So if you get that combination right, you will have a reasonably smooth sailing. I'm saying reasonably smooth sailing because the sailing is never smooth. But if you have the combination not right, imagine you're trying to build a building, but the foundation is not correct. So you will not be able to build a very strong and a very tall building. Your initial team that you are going to hire, and I'm specifically using the word hire, because you have to sell your idea to them. You have to sell a dream to them. There's nothing with you. There's no organization. There's no company. There's no money. You are essentially selling a dream to them. So it is important that they are as passionate about the dream as you are. Second thing is the candor or the openness that you can have with people. That is of extreme importance. Most of the organizations or most of the startups fold up within 12 to 24 months. The main reason for that is the founders, they did not share candor. If one person was wrong in something or made a mistake, instead of openly understanding and correcting that, they would start playing on their individual egos. And that is very important. That's why I said candor is very important. So if you have a complementary skill. On top of that, you have an open communication across your team. You are, you are basically as comfortable with each other so that you can bring bad news to each other. You can easily tell somebody that, okay, this is not the way it is working. Now remember, the other person has to understand you are talking about the task, not at that person, because that's what candor is, where you do not take the communication personally, but you understand communication for the value that it brings. Now, why I am focusing more on candor is because that also will decide the kind of trust you will have among each other. And you cannot build a team without trust. Okay. Then come other smaller things, but critical things for the team, which is the decision-making structure. Who is going to be responsible for what? What is going to be joint responsibility? What is going to be, for example, if there is a deadlock, whose vote will, be dominant at that point in time? Who will decide what you guys will go ahead with as a decision? Because remember, the decision has to be owned by everybody. It may not be your decision. It may be a decision by one of your team members, but you have to own it equally. Everybody has to own it equally. So all these structures have to be in place for you to work effectively as a team. Okay. And the bottom line, the base of it all is that everybody has to be equally committed. You know that chicken and ham story. No? Okay. So it's about when you are having, let's say for breakfast, you want to have an omelette, or you want to have a, say, chicken burger or hamburger. Ham is more apt out here. So for an omelette, the chicken is just what? Chicken is just involved. I mean, the chicken has laid egg. Okay, but when you are having hamburger, in outside it could be pork or anything else, but let's take a case of it could be lamb. So lamb has actually lost his life. So that is the difference between being involved and being committed. So if somebody says that I want to be a co-founder, but okay, I'll work 2 hours a week, when I have time, then probably whatever be the skills, whatever you may respect that person a lot for his or her skills, probably not the right co-founder for you. The commitment has to be equal. The passion has to be equal. Only then you can lay the foundation of a strong team to build your startup. Okay, I'll take a pause out here in case you have any questions.
So I wanted to ask something. So a lot of the times it's not possible for people to actually start with the startup in a full-time role. So for example, if I'm still in college, or maybe if the person that I want to onboard has a very comfortable job, or maybe the person will not be able to afford working in a startup at a very low salary. So what do you do in that case?
Excellent question. So let us say, what's the aim of building a startup? You want to build a successful business, right? You do not want your startup to be in the same initial struggling phase for, let's say, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Maybe that phase will last for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Anything beyond that, probably the business plan, is not right. So if you have this kind of person on your team and you really want that person on your team, or you are one of those people, who wants to be part of the startup but cannot afford, you have to set a timeline. And you have to set a milestone plan. You say that, okay, in 6 months, let us say the product will be for 6 months, I'll contribute 2 hours every day without money, for example, because time is the only commodity I have. I can contribute that. But by 6 months, we should have progressed X level on the plan. Okay, that is your first check as a startup as well as a co-founder. If you have not reached that X level of execution of plan, then do you need to fine tune the plan? Okay, if you have reached it and you still find it personally challenging to come on board full time, you set up next milestone that, okay, fine, Now that we have built product, we have got probably, let's say we get 50 paying customers for the product or service. That is when I will come part-time. Maybe I'll work 2 days a week. So essentially what is happening is you are setting progressive milestones. You are not at the end of 2 years still working those 2 hours a week. You know, by setting those progressive milestones, whether two things. One, as an organization, as a startup, whether you are achieving your goals or not, whether your plan is viable or not, if you need to fine tune it, what changes do you need to make, so that validation happens. Second thing, as a co-founder, what validation happens is whether this person is really committed or not. Because if you are making progress as per plan, and the person is still saying that, oh, I have got this problem, I have got that problem, then that person is still not committed. So that, that automatically, the execution part will automatically bring out the reality.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Welcome. I think there was another question.
Yes, sir. So, when a startup is scaling up, if I have someone in place for a particular role, if I believe that the current role would require more skill sets in the next few months, should I hire that person or look for internal promotion? Or if I bring in a seasoned executive that has done that before, how do I integrate him into the culture of the startup? Because if he's from a corporate sector, maybe he has a full style of working. Whereas in a startup, your backs are against the wall. There's a push style of working. So how do I do that?
So let me answer this question in two parts. One is the first part. You said that, whether, now that I'm scaling, I've done something, I've built something, now I want to scale. So at that point, what time should I do? Should I push my people who have got some skill, but they do not have everything? Should I push them up the ladder or get somebody from outside who has got experience? Now, let's first address what should you do with the existing people, and what typical mistake startups make out there is, if somebody has joined your team at the beginning and that person has X set of skills. Now, there are two types of skills. One what I call technical skills, and other behavioral skills. Technical skills is something, let's say marketing, finance, all these are technical skills, or computer programming. They are all technical skills. Technical skills upgradation is comparatively easy as compared to behavioral skills. Getting the right behavior, learning the right behavior takes years. The transition takes years. Upgrading your skill may take weeks or months at the most. So what you need to identify at that point in time is, what is the role demanding? So unfortunately, I still see most of the organizations write JDs, job descriptions. Whether it's a startup or whether it's a large organization, they write job description. It should be role description, because role description actually talks about things you would do in that role, which will not be covered in the technical part of it. For example, if you want a person, a senior person, we take example of software per se. You want a person who can architect or build you a solution for cloud. Okay. Now, if you have a good technical resource internally, scaling that up is easy. Okay, because it's just learning new technology but what underlying behavioral expectation out there is that when you build that complex architecture, the person should be able to explain it to customers. Which means essentially the person should be good at communication. So if you have got a fantastic technical person but cannot communicate for his life, I mean, half the battle is lost, because you will need somebody else to fill in that gap. So at that point in time, you may want to bring in somebody from outside, or there could be another team member who may not be that technically good, but is very good at communication. Maybe 60-70% of this person. That person may be a better suited to that role. So that's why it is the demand of the role that should define whether you want to pick up somebody from within the organization and grow that person, or get a lateral hire. So that's the answer to your first part. Second part is, how do you evaluate whether the person is fit for the culture or not? The best way to go about that is to work together for some time. Get that person in. It could be for a week, 2 weeks, anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks should be good enough time frame for you to understand. Now you may say that, okay, the person is working full time. The investment has to be from both sides. If a person wants to come on board, the person has to ensure that he or she spends time in the startup, because it's equally important for that person. You cannot say that, okay, either I will come on board or I'll not come on board without this interaction, which is very crucial for when you have got a significant difference between somebody coming from outside as a consultant. Because let's say you have built this nice small organization of 5-10 people, and somebody senior like me comes, and because of my fixed mindset and because I have been used to doing things in a certain way, starts ordering you all around, starts causing friction among you. You do not want that. Typically 2 to 4, and it's very difficult to figure out that behavior in an interview of 1 or 2 or 3 hours. So that's why you have to work together for a few days, few weeks, and then evaluate whether the person is the right fit for the role or not. So I hope that answers your other part also.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, can I add an additional question to that?
Sure.
So in the first part, if I don't know what to expect out of the role, as a founder, should I run it for a month or so?
As
know what skill sets might be required for that role.
So here is best way to go about it. I mean, there are different ways. You can choose whatever way you want. One is figure out things yourself, or try things yourself until you figure out. Other is go to a mentor. Reach out to somebody who has already done that. And the mentor, probably you'll need half an hour or 1 hour from the mentor. And that person will tell you that, okay, if you do X, Y, Z, these are the challenges you will face. How do you, that 1 hour should give you the same kind of inputs as trying 1 month on your own would. You don't have to get an employee. You just go ahead. And there are a lot of good experts available out there in the world. You can just reach out and ask them, hey, I'm facing this problem. Can you help me out there? That's about it.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome, Shreyans.
So we also have one more question in the chat box. I'll read it out for you. So as you said, you were in a corporate sector and then you did your MBA to get better knowledge about the field and then re-entered the corporate world. What's the difference that you found with and without MBA?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Now, see, I did business first and then I did MBA. So I did a startup first and then I did an MBA. Most of the people do it other way around. So my primary aim of doing MBA at that point in time was, I was already working in a corporate, and there were two motivations. One is the corporate encouraged further studies, so their only condition was that I should pass all semesters and they'll pay part of my fees. So that financial aspect was one thing that was encouraging. Second thing was that I had this burning desire of wanting to know what went wrong. Why we were not that successful. So when I joined MBA after 2 years, I realized two things. One is because I had already done the startup earlier, so almost 70 to 75% of what is being taught in the college I already knew as a practical knowledge. So 20 to 25% was value add for me. But remember, I had already run business for 3-4 years. If I have not, and I had first-hand experience in traveling like 12 hours in a bus to do some installation somewhere. I had that first-hand experience in trying to get money from customers. So I had all that experience. Probably I learned a lot of jargon in MBA as compared to what I did not know earlier. But value add, I would say around 25 to 30%. So any other question?
Yes, sir. So I would like to ask a question. So as you talked about the behavioral things, behavioral aspects an employee should have. So accountability is also one of those things that I think. And so how can we inculcate this quality of being self-accountable and accountable as a team? I think, yeah.
Okay, excellent question. So that sort of goes back to the first thing I talked about in teams, that's candor. You have to be open to talk about anything. Without that, it is not possible, because it is not just about, see, candor is not just about being able to communicate openly. It's about also holding each other accountable. So it's not about self accountability. You will probably learn in one of the theories in your MBA. Most of the people are self motivated. When they join any organization, tomorrow you will join any organization, you will want to do your best. So you are self motivated, but the organization will probably demotivate you because of its structures, processes, whatever. So essentially, any person, the point I'm trying to make is, any person who joins an organization is self-motivated or feels accountable to a certain extent. It is just the way the organization treats that person, the organization makes that person feel, defines the further course of action by that person. So if you have a very strong team, which communicates openly with each other, respects each other, but at the same time holds each other accountable. If somebody has committed, let's say one person has committed that I'll provide this report by tomorrow 4 p.m. and the person does not provide by 4 p.m. Anybody should be able to question that person. Hey, you had committed this, where is this report? Without the person feeling bad that I'm being questioned. That's what real candor is all about. And that's what brings accountability to the whole team. Accountability is team culture. If you do not have accountability culture, for example, if you are an entrepreneur, you say that, okay, I am the boss, I can be late, and you expect all your employees to be on time. I'm sorry, that will not work. You have to lead by example. You have to hold yourself accountable as well as others accountable. Only then you can hold others accountable. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. But the thing is that everybody wants to be in the good books of everyone. So why would someone provide a negative remark to anybody else?
So everybody wants to be in good books is the worst thing that can happen to an organization. Because then you are not working for what is right for the organization. You are working for being in the good books of others, which is essentially maintaining facades. So you do something just to make people happy. You do not do it because you believe in it. And if I have such kind of a team member, and I found that somebody is playing just for the sake of showing off, that person is unlikely going to last on my team for long. And that is one of the crucial things that a leader has to understand. On that note, let me pause and play a small video for you. That should give you some understanding as a leader, how you should go about identifying what kind of people you have in your team. Just give me a minute. And so let's go back. Is it visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me play. So could you relate to this video?
Yes, sir.
Right? So you know what as an entrepreneur you need to do. If what that person did at the, he was just trusting his team blindly, thinking that everybody is following whatever I'm doing because I'm committed. But then once he sees that there's another team which has moved way far ahead of this, he stops and starts taking action. And that's what an entrepreneur has to do. If there is somebody who is just working to show off that I'm working but not actually contributing, that person has no place on the team, especially in a startup. I mean, startup is starved of resources, the right resources. So you cannot have people just fooling around.
Thank you, sir, for the question's answer.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Good evening, sir. I'm Poonam.
Yes, Poonam, please go ahead.
Sir, I wanted to know that which type of subjects we should focus on so that we can, if we want to become an entrepreneur in coming years, because we are quite confused as what subjects we can focus.
So here's my take on that. Whatever is being taught in MBA, you anyway should know that. You should know HR, you should know accounting, you should know marketing, you should know strategy. All those are basic things that you would know. You should know. What you need to do apart from that as an entrepreneur is do two things. Learn from outside world. Read books written by entrepreneurs. Now, two types of entrepreneurs: successful, not so successful. So if you read books only by successful entrepreneurs, you will learn what to do. But if you read books by entrepreneurs who are not successful, you will learn what mistakes to avoid. Okay, so ensure that you learn. Go and join startup communities. Even if you just want to be an entrepreneur, go and join startup communities. There are so many of them. They have mushroomed like anything now. Just attend their sessions, see what they are talking about. That itself will give you much more broader perspective of what startups are all about, rather than any bookish knowledge. So it's more about how broadly you think, or how the more wider your sources of information are, the better you will be able to run and start up. So go breadth-wise.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Before we move ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Yes,
Sir, I have a question. As in most of the startup, the work environment is quite dynamic. So how are these employee-related policies formulated? How are they implemented? How are they planned?
Excellent question. Very good question, because I have dealt with it quite a bit. Most of the startups will not have any policies. Absolutely no policies, especially when you are around 5 to 10 people. Because out of 5 people, probably 3 or 4 would be co-founders itself. So they do not usually need to have a policy. It's just that when you start growing beyond 8, 10 people, you start having 1 employee, 2 employees, 3 employees, then you start having mix of cultures. That's when you realize that you need to have a certain set of policies. Now, most of the organizations or startups, what they do, Google has been their best friend. There are a lot of policies available on the Google, basic drafts. You don't need a very detailed policy, but this basic structure, the frame of the policies is already available on the Google. So many startups, what they do is pick up from whatever search they can do, whatever structure they can get, and then start customizing. Typically, there is no need for specialized HR until the organization goes beyond 25, 30. Mostly when it hits around 50 is when the organization starts feeling the need for having a person to manage the HR department. Till that time, mostly it is one of the founders or co-founders who handles all the HR related inquiries. They would probably get a consultant to draft the policies or have a recruiter who would loosely enforce policies, but mostly the ownership or responsibility is with the founding members. It's just that when your startup starts growing 40, 50 and above, when you start having levels of hierarchy, because your team is growing bigger, you cannot manage everybody yourself. So you would need somebody at medium level. Then that's when you start getting slightly away from your team, because there'll be some manager in between you and actual employee who would be doing the work. That's when the need for having a neutral person out there who would ensure that everything, all the policies are being followed as expected, all the employee grievances, because there is now, the person may not be comfortable going to his or her manager. So the founders may not have time because they would be busy in trying to scale the business. So that's when you need somebody who would ensure that the effectiveness of the policies that have been drafted is managed. And second thing is that if you need to update policies, procedures, that is done. So that's typically how I have seen startups go.
Thank you, sir. I got a lot of idea. Thank you.
Questions?
So I think there are no further questions right now. So you could continue and then we will move again to it.
Sure. Okay. So I already talked about startups and then getting to scale, and I talked about the importance of picking the right person for the right role, because when you are scaling, I just mentioned that once you grow 40, 50, you need to put a management layer in between, because you need some people who, typically what happens at that point in time is that you end up promoting people not based upon their ability, but based upon who has been with you the longest and who wants to be a manager. Somebody who has been with you and you feel a sense of obligation that this person trusted me when nobody, this is my first employee, for example, or this is my second employee, and he or she came on board when nobody was willing to work with us at low salary and all. Now that we have grown to a certain level, I feel obliged as a founder to make that person a manager. Now, what happens most of the times, that is not a right decision. If I give you some statistics, around 60 to 70% of the times, that is not the right decision. Because when we hire that person for mostly his or her technical skills. Vijay talked about core skills. And the moment we start growing, we want people who can manage other people, who can lead other people. Because I know a lot of people talk about leadership is not management, management is not leadership, which is correct. But you cannot be a leader until you know how to manage. So for a leader, being a manager is one of the critical skills. So you need to, at that point in time, identify who is the right person to lead this team. Not necessarily who has been with me for the longest time. So that is the first real critical test of your leadership, because it is convincing a person that that person is not right for the job. and still you want that person to continue with you. That is when your test in actual people management starts. Because till that time you had one-to-one relationship with everybody. Now you do not want to put in a person who is not fit for the job to be responsible for another team of 4 or 5 or 10 people who will not be working with you directly. Because trust me, and I have seen this, such people do more damage. They'll be these brilliant minds who took maximum load in your startup, and because you felt obliged to promote them to a leadership role, they start driving everybody else the way they are themselves driven. They do not believe in delegation. They do not believe in feedback. Most of them. Either they have to be taught those skills before the role is to be assigned to them. So you can take a lag of 6 months to 1 year. Say that, okay, probably 1 year down the line, I would want this person to lead the team. So let us start delegating some activities to this person. That is how you build your next level. You do not one fine day say that, oh, I cannot give time to everybody in my organization. Now let me make somebody a manager and assign these 5 people or 10. And unfortunately, that is how most of the startups work. So the decision to appoint somebody a manager is like 5 or 10 minute job. You have to ensure that the person whom you move into that role you provide that person sufficient resources and support to be successful. Set him or her up for success, not for failure. That is your responsibility as a leader at that point in time. Because if you do not do that due diligence, if you do not provide that person resources and support in terms of, it could be trainings, it could be, taking small baby steps at a time, delegating small pieces of leadership or management aspects, and building that person's confidence and skill, and continuously evaluating. So that lag of 6 months to 1 year is what you have to plan, and replicate the same for multiple roles that you'll have. That will ensure that you will have consistency in building culture. Because if you just pick a good resource, you are potentially destroying that person's career, because the person cannot do justice to the new role. At the same time, creating frustration within your larger team, and more often than not, the attrition levels go up significantly. So that is the stage where you have to, when you are scaling, you have to actually think and say that, okay, I know how to scale for my sales. I know how to scale. I have taken care of all cash flow, break-even, everything. I got everything. This plan worked out beautifully. How are my people going to support this? What critical skills, behavioral as well as core skills, do I need for this particular role? And then pick and choose people either from within your team, or like Shreyansh said, get people from outside who fit that role, because then they will do justice to that role. Otherwise, you are setting up the person for failure, and that is not something you would want to do to your organization. Okay. Now remember, that said, many times we tend to ignore, or we do not observe the contribution of everybody within your organization in making your organization a success. So, for example, if you're a small organization, even the person who brings tea to you, once you grow probably 10, 15 people, you will need somebody who will do maintenance, who will clean up the office, who will get you tea, that way. Even that person is crucial for the success of your organization. Because when somebody will come to visit you, how that person treats your visitor is going to make an impression. So there are a lot of, the point I'm trying to make is that there are a lot of hidden hands that go in making an organization. It is not just the face of the organization, the people who are in the front, who talk to the external world, who are the movers and shakers in our organization. There are a lot of, if I take the same analogy of car, there are a lot of hidden nuts and bolts and screws which make the organization stick together and work smoothly. One nut out of place and the car will stop. But essentially, when we're thinking of car, we think of engine, we think of chassis, we think of transmission, we think of tires, but we do not think of all these small nuts and bolts, which essentially are a lot of people within the organization who you would probably not notice in your day-to-day life. If you want to be a really successful entrepreneur, make sure that you take care of such people as well. Why? Because you want people to be with you when chips are down. Lot of startups, we live in very exciting times. Lot of startups closed in last few months. And one of the reasons is they had not planned that their customers will go. Nobody planned for. I mean, this is something which you cannot plan for. But what happens at this point in time is who will really stick with you, and it will depend a lot on how you have treated your people. Because at the end of the day, people work for money, but money is just one aspect. There are a lot of things. If you really want people to be loyal to you, there are a lot of ways you will ensure that you treat them right, you gain their trust, you gain their loyalty, and they will stick with you in difficult times. And that is when you really need people. Then that's when you really see what your leadership as an entrepreneur is all about. So that's all I had to share for today. I'm open for any further questions.
Hello, sir. My question is, like, in the beginning, since team size is very much small and they are not correlated activities, like this person needs to do this thing or that thing, and all our tasks are interrelated, so there are high possibility of conflicts. So how to look that way?
Yes, very true, very true. When you are starting up, everybody does everything. Production guy will do marketing, a marketing guy will lift things, do delivery. Yes, that is true. If you remember, one thing I said is the ownership of decisions. Everybody will do everything, but there will be somebody whose word will be the last word on that subject. That's what I mentioned earlier. So you decide that, okay, everybody will talk to customers, but if there is a difficult customer, or if we, whether to give discount or not give discount, this is the person who is going to take that decision, not necessarily the CEO. It may be, one of the persons. But then I also mentioned that you have to respect that decision. You have to own that decision as a team. So that is how you resolve conflict, because conflict will come. So if you decide in the beginning itself that, okay, we have all these 4 essential roles, we know we'll do everything, but this person will decide for X, this person will decide for Y, this person will be responsible for finances, this person will be responsible for marketing, then you know that at the end of the day, one person will be responsible for that.
Sir, a follow-up question to the same. In the beginning, we know that there is a common goal for between co-founders and the founders. So in the entire team, but as we start expanding, there are certain deviations from the main goal, because during the expansion stage, some suggest that we must go with this product or this innovation, but others resist to bring in the change. How can one tackle the situation?
So the goal essentially remains same. The goal does not change. The means to achieve the goal change. Now, when you start a business, you want to build a successful business. Okay, there are 2 things that happen. One is people become so attached to their idea, that any change is very difficult to do. So, as an entrepreneur, my suggestion would be never become attached to your idea. Think of what Gita says: "Karam karo, baki bhul jao." Because if you stay too attached to your idea, you will resist any reasonable change to be successful. If there are 10 people saying that, this will not work, we need to do something different. See, if there is one person saying it, maybe that person is wrong. 2 people, 3 people could be wrong. But if there are 20 people telling you this is not the way to do things, probably there's something wrong with the idea itself. So first thing is, as a startup person, you should never be too attached to your idea. You should be passionate. Passion and attachment are 2 different things. You should be passionate, but you should not be too attached. Second thing you have to remember as an entrepreneur is that what you will start off with and what you will end up with would be significantly different. And you can talk to any entrepreneur, they'll tell you this, that when you start with the idea and what you actually ended up building and selling, there was a significant gap. So if you're open, you will be able to reach there. If you're not open, you'll be stuck where you are, which essentially means that the business will be a failure. So that is one way of thinking as an entrepreneur. Second thing is that if you have to convince others, it would depend upon multiple things. One is if they are your peers, your co-founders, then it would depend upon the kind of candor you have. Like I said, I'm bringing it again and again because that's very important. The kind of communication, the kind of relationship, trust, loyalty you share with each other, commitment you share with each other will go a long way. Because then, you will be able to convince each other because all of you are working for the same goal. But if there is no candor, sorry. Second level of resistance would be probably from the employees or, wider team members. In which case, you have to consider I think it's called the KR curve, Kubler-Ross curve. Let me do a quick search. Kubler-Ross model. Yep. Yeah. So there is something called Kubler-Ross model. Essentially, what happens? The first reaction for any change is resistance. Okay, so you are all MBA students. You should be able, at least people who are in HR might get exposed to that. So go and read about it. So it will tell you the different stages that every person, and it's not just about entrepreneurs or organizations. I can assure you this is applicable to all your personal lives also. This is if you have to remember one thing in life, take this Kubler-Ross curve and just imbibe it. This will help you change yourself faster because you will go through all the stages every time there's a change in your personal or professional lives. But to move from the resistance or anger stage to actually compliance stage would be much faster. So that is how I would suggest you deal with employees, because once you understand this is how their behavior will be, then you know how to adjust your communication, your behavior at each level, and move them from the resistance stage to actually performance stage.
Sir, and adding to this question, as we know, there is a huge cultural difference in an organization. So how do we deal with the cultural conflict or make sure that they all working together with a positive attitude towards a common goal of an organization?
So first of all, if your organization has multiple cultures, that is the recipe for disaster. The organization will not last for long. I mean, they may run business, but essentially the churn in people will be significant. It is important, since we're talking about startups out here, it's important to understand that setting the culture right in the beginning and getting the right fuel. That's why I said, when you have co-founders, if you have candor, you will have everybody who is joining that team behave in a similar fashion. Because if they are not transparent, if they're not committed, if they're not passionate, they will not be able to last in that team for long. So that is, and as you grow organically over a period of time, you will ensure that all the new hires will automatically fall in that space. And I have seen this happen in organizations. I have been part of organizations where people would come, not fit in, and leave within 3 months. Because the organization could, they themselves felt out of place. If everybody is open, if everybody from, let's say any newcomer could criticize what the CEO is saying and say that I don't agree with this, you convince me. And these people would come and say that, okay, now I have got experience of 15 years. You have to listen to what I'm saying because I have got this experience. They did not fit in. They do not fit in. So it depends upon, if we go back to the first statement I made, is what co-founders you choose will define the culture of your organization. The first team defines the culture of the organization. The challenges start coming in when you grow significantly big and you start acquiring other organizations. There you don't have liberty. Two different organizations would have different culture. But if there's a merger or acquisition, then the challenges come into picture. Then you have to pick and choose and define that, okay, this is something which is right in this culture. We want to continue with this. And it has to come top bottom. You cannot change. I gave that example earlier also. You cannot have CEO not being punctual and expect his employees to be on time. It doesn't work. Leadership and behavior, whatever is cultural, especially whatever is exhibited at the top will trickle down to bottom. It is never bottoms up. Hope that answers you, Kajal.
Yes, sir. So, in adding to this question, I just want to ask, there's a 360-degree feedback. Is this work in an startup, or is this only work within an organization where all the employees will know each other?
So 360-degree, if you have, again, it depends what kind of organization you are building. If you have got open culture, like I mentioned, you don't need 360 because everybody will be talking, openly and freely to everybody. If you have got a closed culture, then 360 will not add any value because people will only give nice comments. And, in 360, it is possible. If you are smart enough, you will know which person has given which feedback. And that's why people avoid giving candid feedback in 360 degrees. They'll give all nice things. Yes, if you are, it's like, see, treat it as your friend circle. Your really best friend will pull you down, will give you the worst possible criticism. Not because that person does not like you. That person wants you to improve. That's why that person will say that, oh, this is not right. What crap you are doing, what crap you are saying. Because at core, that person wants better. That person has got good intentions for you. Versus somebody, who you are just acquainted with and, say, yeah, nice. Even if you're the worst dressed person, they're, oh, yes, very nice. All good things. So that's what 360 unfortunately ends up the kind of feedback in most organizations.
Thank you, sir.
So I have a question. Like, we know as much as the HR department deals with new hires, they have to deal with parting ways with a few people. And as you mentioned, letting go of people is important at times, but hard also. Like, so how to deal with the situation without being biased?
So if I understand the question correctly, when people are leaving an organization, how to manage that situation without bias, right? So first things first is remember, whether you are a manager or you are HR, when a person has decided to leave is not when the person resigns. The person has decided to leave probably 3 to 6 months before resignation comes in. Okay, that's the first thing to keep in mind. If you are a smart manager, smart leader, and you have open communication with your team members, you will know when your team member is planning to leave, because that you have that. Many people leave for career growth. They say, I want to study further. So, or many people say that I need more money. And that your organization cannot pay that kind of money. This person needs. So essentially, if you are a manager or a HR person who maintains good relationship with people, you will know when people are moving out. So if you take the case of manager and that this person is going to move after 6 months because the person has said, hey, next year I'm going to look for a new job because in spite of 10, 15, 20%, whatever hike I'll get, that will not be sufficient. I'm buying a new house or I'm getting married or, could be n number of reasons. So you start planning the transition from there itself. Okay. So essentially what happens is that you encourage and encouragement, you can take that to a certain level where you can actually help the person get a job outside. So that is the kind of level you can actually go with. You can share that person's resume with your friend circle. Say this person is good in these areas. That is ideally how you should leave your part ways with your employees, where they understand and know that you are parting amicably with both parties' best interests in mind. The person was honest enough to tell you beforehand that I'm moving out. You cannot satisfy that person's financial needs because you're a small company, cannot do it. At the same time, the person gives you sufficient notice so that whatever transition is possible can be planned. Now, unfortunately, what happens mostly is that because we do not have this kind of openness, because the managers focus more on managing than leading, you have one fine day and somebody comes, hey, this is my resignation, or, they send by mail, SMS, WhatsApp, whatever. And you come to, oh, now as a manager or leader, what do I do? Because my client is waiting for a project, or I have committed something to customer. So that is ideally not good state to be in. Even if you have got that state, you have a discussion with the person and see how you can both evolve a mutually agreeable plan, exit plan, the transition plan. Because I'm sure the employee does not want to leave with bad impression, because now we do background checks. People do talk to earlier organizations, and if one fine day, I am your employee and I tell you I'm not coming from tomorrow, I don't care about this organization. At some point in time, you will hit that, the feedback will come to you. Somebody will call you, hey, how is this person? That's how it actually starts. And you'll say, yeah, he's good at his work, but, and that's how feedback usually starts. And trust me, I have been on both ends. I have had people reach out to me saying that, okay, I have got this person, he fits to the role. What do I say? Then I say, XYZ good, XYZ, ABC not good, you decide. So this is how it impacts people future. Now, your role as a HR has to be that you ensure that the interests of both are met as reasonably as possible. If management is being unreasonable, if the when I say management, I mean the person who reporting manager. If that person is being unreasonable, you have to ensure that you tell that person, see, if you hold this person back by hook or crook, this person is not going to be productive, because he has mentally switched off 6 months back. So trying to force this person to stay back is not going to be productive. At the same time, you connect with the person who is on his way out, and ensure that he or she transitions well. So that is how you would probably handle it reasonably. Given there could be edge cases, which would probably need a discussion on case-to-case basis, but I'm talking in general. 80-90% cases would be like this.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Sir, I also have a question.
Yes, Vibhav.
Sir, should startups focus on creating a leadership pipeline from the beginning? And if yes, then won't it block the path for talents who are outside the organization if they do so?
See, when you start off, like I said, typically you start wondering about leadership pipeline when you are 20, 30, because as you start growing, you need somebody to fill in the gaps. And that is the time when you should actually start thinking about your leadership pipeline, because okay, you got one person, today you are 50, in 3 months or 6 months you'll be 60. So it's not that you will not do anything for 3 months and then start thinking, oh, what do I do? So essentially, the moment you start feeling the need for next level of leadership is when you start planning for the long term. What kind of leaders you want, what kind of skills you want your leaders to have, what kind of culture your organization should have, because that's the time when you should do a reality check. Okay. Now, your other question about wouldn't it, deprive the organization of external talent, which could be better. So when you are 30, 40, 50 strong, very unlikely that, you would hire somebody externally and need those kind of skills, specialized skills at that point in time. And when you grow 100, 200, 300 strong and more, essentially you yourself will realize that you do not have sufficient pipeline internal. Okay, that is one thing. Second thing is that it is possible that you have sufficient pipeline internally. Sometimes, for the sake of creative conflict, you want to infuse talent from outside. Because it could go monotonous, because you are building a pipeline, you're doing everything right. But just to bring in that aspect of creative conflict, because once you get somebody from lateral hire, that person will come with their own perceptions, thought processes, do's and don'ts, and you would want to challenge your team. Now, two things will happen. One is either the person who is coming from outside will come with fantastic ideas, and you already know that your team is open because you built that open culture. So whatever are good ideas will be acceptable to your team, and the person will feel comfortable. Or the person will come up with fixed mindset, oh, this is the only way to do things. And your team, the person himself or herself will feel out of place after some. Because your culture is so strong. It welcomes good ideas, but it does not welcome bullshit. So that automatically that filtering will happen. I hope that answers your question.
Sir, I have a question. Can I go ahead with it?
Yes, please.
Sir, I'm Shayandeep. Sir, first of all, the session was really insightful, and we really, got to know many things from you. Sir, my question is, I have observed this. Sir, in today's startups, what is happening is they have a different kind of structure where they are paying very high packages. They have good reward structures, like good incentives, which is better than the industry standard and better than the corporate counterparts. And what they are expecting in return is good revenue. And for this, they are putting pressure on the employees, and the pressure is kind of uniformly distributed across hierarchy. The AVP puts pressure on the manager puts on the associates, and this continues. So what they believe in, we would pay you good, and if you can sustain, you be there, otherwise we don't mind. And now in this whole structure, HR is just for the sake of being there. I mean, HR doesn't really have any say in these things, because the manager and the higher management takes the decision. I mean, we have given him 3 weeks to perform, then there would be 1 week for PIP, and then they would just fire that person off, right? Just not maintaining any kind of interaction with the HR and what you have talked about. So, sir, if this is what my competitors are doing, and I mean, can I do something which is quite ethical? What you have discussed so far. I mean, if this is what the competitors are doing, sir. I hope I made myself clear, sir.
Yeah, I see ample examples of that in market. So you have made yourself quite clear. So first things first, you as an employee, if you are taking that kind of a job, means you are accepting that kind of pressure, because their culture, their work culture is open. So that's the first thing. That's a conscious decision you are making. So in that case, that their HR is not, empowered enough. There is a lot of unreasonable pressure. But the only decision you are making at that point in time is that some few lakhs of rupees that they are paying you extra. So you can think of that as the cost you're paying for getting those few lakhs of rupees. Okay, that's a conscious choice you have. From the startup side, this is from the employee perspective. So you are making a conscious choice. So you know what you are getting into. You cannot complain later. Oh, I did not know. I thought, you cannot join a corrupt party and expect honest people to be out Okay, so that is given. Now let's talk about the other side. If I, as a startup, want to grow very fast, now again, this depends upon the founders. If you want to set up a business, what is your objective of setting up a business? What is your role model? If your objective of setting up a business is, get investor, scale, then either get acquired or acquire something, as is happening in the market. We have seen in last few years, a lot of such organizations having significant growth. The decline also happens very fast because the business models are not strong enough. For many years they struggle to make profit because the focus is typically on customer acquisition, the numbers. The focus is not on revenue and profitability. So don't get swayed by the valuation. The valuation, if you see some startups, it went up to billions and then it came down, squat slash more than half. So that is just a number game. If you are an entrepreneur, you have to think, what am I building? Am I trying to build a business, or am I trying to build something which will scale fast? I don't know what. Because if you really want to build a business, businesses take time to build. You will see a lot of unicorns in last few years in India. Some of the unicorns, they are still not profitable. Okay, and their growth was like they became from zero to hero like in probably 1 year, 2 year, 3 years time frame. But if you study market in last year to 2 years, there have been additional unicorns, and they have been in business for 8, 9, 10, 12 years. They have built their business stably over a period of time. I don't say that the people out there do not have pressure, but they will not have the kind of crazy pressure in a startup where focus is on numbers. Whether those numbers are actually leading to any business or not is immaterial. So you as an employee have to make a conscious choice what kind of startup you are joining. And on the flip side, you as an entrepreneur have to decide what kind of a business you want to build. So that should answer your question, hopefully.
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you so much, sir.
Good evening, sir. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, Vatsal, you are audible.
Yeah. Sir, I have worked in a startup, and that is the very first job which I did as a full-timer. So I have noticed that when a startup is in its initial phase, there is a lot of informal communication. You work with the CEO itself, and there's a small team. All of that is very informal in nature. But as the startup grows, the team expands, all of that becomes very formal and rigid. I have personally experienced this, so I can relate more to it. So in this situation, what can a startup do to keep it formal? Because sometimes being informal, it leads to creating good ideas. And being rigid and being in the box would sometimes kill the entire creativity. So how do we go ahead with this?
See, as a startup founder, and I think I've blogged about it, I have written multiple times about it. The kind of culture you want to build first depends upon your core team, and that's what you rightly said. It's very informal in the beginning. Everybody knows everybody else. Then when you start putting in the next line, you have to be very careful to choose people at that point in time. See, what happens in most of the startups is they pick wrong people. They pick wrong people to put in their level out there, and that takes everything for a toss. So even if the intentions are good, but the people are wrong, you just think. I took the car analogy in the beginning. Your 3 tires are fine, but one tire is punctured. How will car move? You need to ensure that whatever tires, every tire is working at equal efficiency, proper pressure, everything. You bring in any person into your organization, or promote any person into your organization who is not fit for the role. that's the recipe for disaster. And that is what if you are a startup founder or co-founder, that is something to keep in mind, that when you grow and you put people out there, you evaluate that person for the role, not what that person has been with you for like 3 years, 5 years, or is your friend who is trying to join you laterally now. I mean, those are all wrong parameters to evaluate people on. You have to have right parameters to evaluate people on and identify the right people who fit those parameters. Only then you can ensure that that thing is continuing.
I agree that. The same problem happened with the firm. They had a lot of rechanging the entire marketing and department. So your point makes valid to me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Walter.
Thank you so much. So, like, we have a lot of questions coming in, but we have already overshot the time by a considerable amount. So, sir, it was truly a knowledgeable session, and we are really thankful to you for sparing time out of your busy schedules. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope your talk has inspired everyone.